Welcome to the Sunset Safari. My name is Brent here Smith. I have Brian Joubert on camera. And as per James Richards' request, the mullet thumb. There we go, the mullet thumb. We have Kirsten and Rebecca in final control. And we have Jamie and Gendre out on the other vehicle. Exciting times. I'm very excited, you might be able to tell. I might be shivering with anticipation. There has been a report of an Incanyen female leopard and her 2 cubs crossing into Cheetah Plains. No one was able to find them on the Sunrise Safari, but the killer bees are on the trail. So we're going to head down there, see if we can find any sign of tracks of Incanyen female and her 2 cubs. And it will be a new leopard for all of us on safariLIVE. But before then, I give you elephants. Hello, Ellies. I do love spending time with elephants, but guys, I am in a bit of a rush here, you know, long way to go, leopards to be found. Hello, madam. Nice little breeding herd, quite a lot of youngsters spread through the bush. A big female about to cross the road there. And as I mentioned on the Sunrise Safari, it is incredible how many elephants are around at the moment. And it has been quite spectacular. Is right next to us, feeding off that monkey orange. Hey, big lady. You can just see this particular herd. I mean, so relaxed in our presence, really not taking any notice of us at all. Bit of an afternoon traffic jam on our way to Cheetah Plains. A very welcome traffic jam, the best type of traffic jam there are. Elephant traffic jams. So what we're going to do, because we're on the move down towards Cheetah Plains, and it is quite the drive, we're going to get Jamie to come take over this elephant sighting from us so we can get down there and start tracking. And I'm just going to let Jamie know exactly where it is. Jamie is already behind us, no need to call on the radio, so let's go join Jamie and this incredible herd of elephants.
Good afternoon and welcome to our portion of the Sunset Safari. As you can see, we've headed across to where Brent is, just so that we can take over the elephant sighting and he can head across to Elephant Plains. So without further ado, not Elephant Plains, sorry, Cheetah Plains. There's too many animal names and plains being combined in my head. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, my name is Jamie and I have Gendre on camera with me this afternoon. And I'm looking forward to starting off our drive with a nice, peaceful elephant sighting. One thing that I really do want to do... Oh, hold on, Brent's just trying to get hold of me. Standing by. Copy that, thank you. Brent just telling me that they extend all the way down the road and saying thank you for taking over so that he can race across to Cheetah Plains. Well, the elephants have been really, really interesting over the last few weeks, and I actually want to share with you something that happened. Hello, little one. It's okay. Something that happened with James and myself whilst out on our tracking team drive this morning. I've never experienced anything like it. James says he's never experienced anything like it. I'm going to offer up at least one explanation to what happened, but it's total guesswork. But this morning, we came around the corner, there were elephants basically everywhere along the western edge of Djuma. And we came around the corner, and a group of 4 youngsters, ranging from a year old, roughly, right up until about 5 or 6, came sprinting, but sprinting down the road in a way that I've never experienced. Oh, wow. Hello, guys. In a way that I've never experienced before. The cows were behind them and totally relaxed. And these babies came racing up to us and stood right in front of the car, clearly anxious, but not quite sure if we were to blame or if we were not. And they were led by the youngest member of the group. He was the one that was running in front, and a tuskless female who was probably about 5 or 6 years old. She was the one who seemed to be the most unsettled. But the females, the adults, were totally, totally fine. And yet it was the babies that had initiated this particular race down towards us. It's completely bizarre. Now, James managed to capture a little bit of it on video, and we just sat quietly. I mean, they weren't of any kind of threat to us. My only guess as to why that's happening, why that sort of peculiar behavior was demonstrated, is the fact that there are so many absolutely enormous bulls about, and most of them in must. I have to be honest, this is the highest concentration of bulls in must that I have seen since I started working in the bush. It just seems as though every corner we go around, there's another large gentleman whose testosterone levels are through the roof, as is typical of must bulls, and who, as a result, is dripping hormonal substances from his temporal glands, and in certain cases, in sort of the height of must, dripping urine from his penis area. It's fascinating to watch the effect that it's having on these youngsters, and I'm just wondering whether the must bulls are not pushing between the calves and the rest of the breeding herds and the females, and causing that almost lost little behavior that they were demonstrating. They just looked so lost and confused. And yet the cows were absolutely calm. Now there's 2 youngsters up ahead playing in the bushes. They're actually fighting each other, but they're in such dense bush, and there isn't an elephant between us and them. But let's just keep an eye on them while they shuffle about in there. And while we do, come on guys, you're going to come out here, or are you going to stay hidden? They have been fighting furiously, 2 little males. And while we do, Eric was wondering at the fact that we don't see any ticks on elephants, or many ticks on elephants, and was wondering why that might be, and if perhaps it is to do with them not carrying ticks, or if maybe they aren't as visible. And was asking whether or not we could see them. And the answer is elephants, despite the sort of the popular myth, they do carry ticks. They carry ticks around the more sensitive areas of their skin. Hello, little one. Let's go forward a little bit. We might even, as this elephant crosses in front of us, we might even have an opportunity to see if there's any ticks around it. There we go, perfectly relaxed. So Eric, they do around the more sensitive, thin areas, and I'm talking sort of the groin areas, not so much in their armpits, maybe around the ears and underneath the folds of the neck. It's just because elephants, it's just because elephant skin is very thick and very wrinkly, so they don't carry much in the way of ticks. It's much easier for a tick to plant itself on, for example, a buffalo with slightly thinner skin. But one of the big giveaways of an animal that's carrying ticks is, of course, the presence of oxpeckers. And that's one area where elephants absolutely are not open to the idea of that intrusion. They do not appreciate the presence of oxpeckers, and any misguided oxpecker that attempts to sit on the back of one is met immediately by a thrashing trunk. You can sort of, those sorts of areas. I have been up close to elephants before for medical attention. There was one particular bull that had to be moved because he'd broken into the reserve that I was working at, and he was being quite fiercely met with considerable resistance by the other elephants in that area. So he was darted and transferred back. So I have managed to be in close proximity to sleeping elephants, and they do have the occasional tick, particularly around the anus and groin area, but not nearly as much as some of the other animals. And generally, when we are close enough to have a look at the ticks of the elephant, we're usually focused on other things. Today it seems as though we cannot drive around Djuma without encountering an elephant somewhere. And Aaron, in New Zealand, you're wondering, what is the biggest herd that I've ever personally seen? And the answer is a herd. It might have been made up of multiple herds, but in this particular area, a herd of probably around just over 100 elephants. It's only happened to me once, and it was in the driest time of the year that we've experienced so far. Now that we've had a little bit more rain, there's a lot more grass for them to eat. They've started splitting off into smaller numbers. But Aaron, if you keep watching over the next few months, you're going to see larger and larger elephant herds coming together and brought together by essentially a lack of resources, whether it be water or food, that will make for some very interesting elephant sightings. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are seeing so many large male elephants. They are responding to the lack of resources within the Kruger National Park itself, at least the part of the Kruger that is directly east of us. I traveled there recently on a trip with Brent, and it was very, very clear just how little food there was. There was still water about, not much, but there was still water, but it was a lack of food that was really playing a role in the movements of the animals. Hello. Let's not be terribly naughty now. Here we go. So these close-up moments with elephants, we don't really get to focus on the parts where we might get to see ticks. As for why all of the elephant bulls are in must is a different question. And I'm not sure if it's linked to the fact that they're all pushed together in a concentrated area. And so the hormones of one are triggering the hormones of another. Or if it is for another reason, maybe it is just a coincidence. Either way, it's made for some really interesting observational opportunities. Most of the time, however, we get to really enjoy sightings like this that are completely and utterly peaceful. You can see how with this particular gorgeous elephant, the tusk on the left-hand side much sharper than that of the right. Oh, hello. Yes, you're very scary. This little female came dashing out of nowhere. It's okay, little one. I don't think this is the same herd that came running up to James and myself. Oh, look at that. Already old enough to eat solid food. And like all of the elephants out here, really enjoying the fresh green of the grass growth that has come up over the last 3 weeks. So Aaron, just to go back to your question about large elephants herd, you were wondering about the largest numbers, and in this kind of area, in this kind of habitat, it's not necessarily going to give rise to elephant herds of the same amount that you might see in and around Botswana, or for example within Zambia in certain areas. Zambia, of course, having the highest concentration of savanna elephants, or the largest number of savanna elephants. What are you doing, little one, with that acacia tree? It's always highly entertaining to watch a young calf fiddling around with her trunk. And there's never quite the same level of coordination. It's like watching a toddler or a young child use a knife and a fork or a spoon. So the technique needs refinement. It's there, it's functional, but the technique is not entirely well practiced just yet. Sorry, I'm not insulting you, little one. You're very clever. But just like a toddler, they have to learn that coordination and that trunk to mouth process, which is why very often when you watch baby elephants go to drink, a lot of the time they run forward and they throw themselves head first into it. And they haven't quite mastered the art of utilizing the incredible instrument that is a trunk. And it truly is the most phenomenal thing. This great protrusion at the end of the nose that is so unique to African and to Asian elephants, slightly different in the Asian elephant's case, but nevertheless the same concept. And it can be used from anything to pulling down branches, although in the case of this little guy, it might have to be a tiny branch to start with, not when he grows up though. Anything from that to coordination as gentle as stroking a calf or picking up a small toothpick-sized stick on the ground. And those vertical cross bands and horizontal bands that wrap around the trunk, depending on how you define the start and the finish of the muscle, anywhere between 50 to 100,000 muscles in that accordion-like trunk. And that gives it that wide range of motion. And the amazing thing about an elephant's trunk is that it's a tool for them. It's a physical communication device. And every little tiny movement of that trunk can tell you something about the way that an elephant is feeling. And then, of course, there's moments like this of bulldozer-like strength, where that cow is moving a dead tree out of the way so that she can get to the sheltered food and grasses that are underneath it. So that fallen tree's been acting as a seed bank and a shading part for the food that's underneath it, and she's decided that's what she wants to get to. Let's go backwards a little bit. We might be able to get a slightly better view of it. In theory. There we go. And there's always these, in elephant sightings like this, there are subtle and not so subtle reminders of just the immense strength of an animal like an elephant. If you think about your own body weight and your own size and how easy it would be to roll something over, roll it over, I'm not saying pick it up. Ooh, it's a little bit tricky. There's very much some trees in the way, but I think that might be as good as we're going to get. But to be able to roll something over of your same weight is not really a feat that would cause you terribly much trouble. You can just imagine how much a 2, 3, up to 6 ton, so between 4,000, more than 4,000 pounds, up to 12,000 pounds worth of animal, the feats of strength that they are capable of accomplishing. And there she's basically taken what looks like a fallen knobthorn, just judging by the shape of the crown. One of the hardest types of wood, and if it's not a knobthorn, it might be, could it actually be a buffalo thorn? No, it's a knobthorn, looking at the color of the wood. Very, very dense wood. She's just casually pushed it out of her way. And now, after all of that, decided that actually she's a little bit bored with that for now. And that there's other opportunities elsewhere. And what elephants do cannot be underestimated in terms of their impact on the ecosystem that they're in. Let's go forward a little bit as she reaches up into the trees. demonstrating that adaptability in terms of feeding. I mentioned that elephants play or have evolved alongside the ecosystem that they are in. They're a crucial part of it. They've been described as conservationists, and to a degree they know far better how to manage their environment than we do. Now, Laura's got a question about what I mentioned earlier about elephants being more closely together for resources. Surely it would make more sense for them to spread out further. And it's an interesting one, Laura, because that's sort of what we noticed with the buffalo when it was very dry, was that they were split up into smaller increments of breeding herds. The reason it doesn't quite work that way with elephants is its access to water rather than food that will actually concentrate them. So they will pack closer and closer together when resources are limited, because they have to move from waterhole to waterhole. They're very water-dependent animals. And bearing in mind, of course, that elephants will have it not easy, but slightly easier than most of the bulk grazers in this area, just because they have access to trees. What will happen over the next few months, if I had to guess, was we'll see more areas being not destroyed, but definitely the nature and the shape of an area, the type of woodland, how dense it is, could well change considerably. Sorry, I've got cisticolas going absolutely crazy off to my right. I'm just trying to decide if they're having an internal argument or if they're responding to the presence of a snake. And just hear those alarm calls, cheep, 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 cheep. But I think it might just be an internal discussion. From what I can see, they don't seem to be focusing on one particular area. They're hopping about, looking at each other. Unfortunately, at the angle that you're at, you can't see from where you are. It's always important to just keep an ear out on what the birds are saying. They've got far better eyesight than we do, and they're also far closer to the ground in a lot of cases. They might spot something like a mongoose or a snake quicker than we would. Let's enjoy our last few moments with this female before she decides to follow the rest of the herd, and talk a bit more about the fact that trees will be the savior of certain animal species during the drought that lies ahead, with their taproot systems that reach deep into the ground to bring up at least a little bit of water. Nevertheless, in certain situations it will not be enough for all of the animals, and certainly not enough to sustain an elephant of all elephants of this size. And Andreen was wondering, would a lack of food and nutrients act to hinder a female elephant in the production of milk? And the answer is yes, it will. And you'll probably find that a lot more of the calves are in fact don't even make it to the point of birth. They might be stillborn on the basis that the mother's body simply cannot provide the resources that they would necessarily need. Of course, bearing in mind that elephants are a widely adaptable animal, and they are known to tolerate far harsher arid conditions than the ones which we experienced here in the Lowveld. But it is going to be a serious change to the typical seasonal patterns that they have become used to. You'll probably find that these wonderful elephants, some of them at 30, 40, 50 years old, have memories that stretch back to the last time there was a drought of at least comparable to this scale, which would have been around the early 90s. And they know exactly how they went through and what they did in order to survive and where they moved. Fortunately for them, even 20 odd years later, they already have access to a bit more in the way of space, moving between the Sabi Sands, the Timbavati, the Baluli, the Kruger areas. All of that ability to move and to travel will be of tremendous advantage to them. But yes, some females will struggle, and as with any drought period, you get a sort of a knock-on effect for the next 2 years. Because, as you know, an elephant's gestation period is of about 2 years, takes them a considerable amount of time to then recover from that situation. So there'll be a lag period of 2 to 3 years where you'll probably see the elephant population of the Kruger National Park either slows its growth rate completely or starts to drop a little bit. Let's head over to Brent and see what's happening out on the Great Plains of Cheetah Plains.
So we have arrived in the plains of the cheetah, and we're just slowly having a check through towards 300 Pan where there's water. And we're going to loop down towards Plains Pan. And we're going to just check there, see if she does have a kill. There's a strong possibility she's going to have moved to and from a drinking spot. So very exciting. After that, we'll check the coral boundary. But we're going to take it nice and slow and make sure we don't miss anything. I'm going to be scanning the road. Brian's going to be scanning the marula trees. So it's going to be exciting. Hopefully, we have some success. So we're approaching the Cheetah Plains of Pan. So far, no tracks. Maju is major is wondering, how am I driving and sitting like this? Well, it is the joy of being long. So I'm got it in second gear, and I can reach the accelerator from here. So I'm just keeping the engine ticking over so it doesn't stall. So one of the joys about being slightly above average of height. So far we're weaving between the 3 in a row pan, and out of the 3 pans there are no tracks around here, but to be completely honest, I wasn't actually expecting to find tracks here. I'm expecting to find them further to the east, and it's always worth double checking though. So we've now cancelled out this area and we're going to slowly move our way and zigzag all the way through to the eastern boundary with Kruger, checking very carefully as we go. Barbara says, Brent, look for sticks. I'll keep a lookout for branches, Barbara. I know I am sitting quite high. I'm only joking. I think Barbara means the Sticks Pride, who have just had some cubs. Unfortunately, they're not going to be moving this far away across here at the moment because their den site's in the Mawati River, and they've got some little cubs there, so they're going to be staying quite close to that area. And I also think Barbara might be referring to the cheetah-like and leopard-like sticks of the plains. We will be looking for them. Hopefully one of those sticks turns out to be alive. You can see this nice sandy substrate. So sitting up high like this, I don't think I'm going to miss a track. As it gets drier and a lot of those sort of perennial pans that have been filled by the rains completely dry up, this area is going to start becoming more and more important, not only to elephants but to buffalo and zebra and wildebeest. And we're going to start getting quite a big concentration of game here. And I'm predicting that come end of next month, this is going to be one of our more productive areas. And nature works like that. At the moment, there's a little bit of respite for it. Grass is doing what little growing it can right now at the end of the growing season, and so are the trees. Getting it prepared for the onslaught of the dry months. So the whole of this sort of low-fault Sabi Sands area is quite similar, and Ashley's wondering, is the vegetation and are the trees different? We will get some different vegetation in trees. You can see the soil here is a lot more sandy than on Djuma. Have a look there. So less sort of quartz, sort of less little stones. But in a whole, there's one of the trees we get here that we don't really get on Djuma. There's only one I know of, and that is a long-tailed cassia. I have had a look at one of those. I did see one that had some nice green seed pods, which I'll have to collect for you. But it's slightly different, especially when you move out onto those big sodic sites that we're about to actually come out to now. You'll see that the open short grasses, lots of sort of herbs, lots of wild basil, wild aniseed, certain wild flowers we might not get at Djuma. But for the whole, the majority of the tree species are very similar. It's just that their configuration can be slightly different. So you'll find that some of the crests here are very, very thick, probably a bit thicker than Djuma. And that's only now while the eddies on there. They'll open them up, that's for sure. But in a whole, I would say it's very similar, especially the far western sectors. But as we move further east to Kruger and we get more of this sort of sandy soil, it does become quite different. Here's another one of those funny little trees that we're not going to see too much of on Djuma. There are a few of them. And that is a low-felt albizia, or a false thorn. So it looks like acacia. The leaves are very similar, but of course it doesn't have any thorns. It's albizia harvey, a low-felt albizia. They do have very pretty flowers, but I haven't seen any of them flowering this year with the lack of rain. Safari Dean says, come on killer bees, find us a leopard. We're on it, Safari Dean. Hopefully it won't take us too long. And it is exciting going tracking for a new leopard in a relatively new area. So we're going to have to learn a little bit of the nuances of Nkanyini and her movements when she's on cheetah plains. And it's going to be very exciting, and to add another character to our many wonderful creatures that we see. Big flock of ground hornbills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One's landed in a tree. 2 landed in a tree. I can't see where the other 2 have gone, but I can see 3 at the moment. That looks like a juvenile with the yellow face. And then another 2 adults. Oh, there's one still on the ground. There we go. That looks like a male. Difficult to tell from this distance. Let's try and sneak a little closer. So there's one in that tree, there's 2 in another dead tree behind, one on the ground. I can't see where the 5th one went. But that wonderful flock of ground hornbills. Oh, he's just taken off as well. Just get through. Not quite as relaxed as our Djuma lone hornbill. we go, look at that. In the tree, there's 3. The other 2 have moved, flown off, unfortunately, a bit further. So it looks like 2 juveniles and an adult male. I wasn't able to sex the other 2, unfortunately. You can see the juveniles don't have that bright red face just yet. It's sort of a pale yellow. You can see how they're opening their mouths. Oh, look at that. Isn't that special? Oh, the last one. Awesome. 5, I think that's the biggest group of ground hornbills I've seen since in the northern Sabi Sand since I've been here. I think the biggest group before that was 3. Oh, lovely. Maybe we'll catch up with them on the next open area, because that's where we're going to check for canyoning. So from what the report I heard, she crossed somewhere around here. I'm going to try and get hold of Shanae now. Shanae. Shanae. So just checking very carefully for any tracks here. Been some ellies around, which could make it a little bit more difficult. Guys, I'm just listening to the game real quickly. So while we search for any sign of canyoning, let's go back to Jamie.
You've come across to Twin Dams on my way actually to search for a different leopard, which is Karula. I was just about to comment on the thirsty butterflies when they all startled and took off. We've got a whole load of African vagrants fluttering about. They've been drinking. Now there's been much in the way of competition at camp to experiment with slow motion cameras in order to catch them taking off. I believe Kirsty so far is winning with her video filmed next to the swimming pool at Inger's, with a whole load of them taking off in slow motion. This afternoon, or between drives this morning, we were doing some safariLIVE stories interviews on quarantine, and there were several of us dashing about attempting to film the great butterfly population that has currently exploded around Djuma and Arathusa. And on the opposite bank is a very, very interesting bird known as a hammerkop. Hammer is a hammer, strangely enough. A hammerkop, a hammerhead, is the name given to the bird due to the shape of its head in Afrikaans, and it has taken to be utilized in English as well. Now, this fascinating little bird is responsible for the single biggest nest of any individual bird. For those of you, there's one hammerkop nest. Where's that hammerkop nest? It's around the Mulwati drainage line. Basically, these nests are so large that raptors very often actually nest on top of them. It's a fascinating dome-like construction of sticks and various grass material. It's led to a number of interesting local beliefs. Now, a big nest like that, made in the trees and the bushes around a riverine area, will automatically play host to not just hammerkop, but a wide range of other animals as well. So as I said, in the case of raptors or storks, they will very often nest on top. The other aspect of the hammerkorp nest that's interesting is they've got a lot of false entrances where it looks like an entrance, but the hammerkorp is the only one that knows the true entrance. As a way of tricking various animals and preventing them from actually making it into the nest and attacking and eating their babies. And that's actually led to a local belief that a hammerkorp can shapeshift, because people were watching a hammerkorp fly into wherever the nest site was, and all of a sudden a stork would fly past, or a snake would crawl out of one of the holes that looked like where that hammerkorp had gone in. So it actually gave rise to this belief that the hammerkorp was a shapeshifter and an embodiment of not such good things, and in fact, if a hammerkorp flies over your house or over you, you are at great risk of bad luck and the possibility of a lightning strike in the case of your house. And in order to prevent that, you've either got to go to some kind of traditional healer or sangoma, some kind of witch doctor who will help be able to cleanse the house of the bad spirits laid upon it by the flight of the hammerkorp. The poor hammerkorp, of course, knows nothing of this and just goes about its day-to-day existence, being completely innocent of all evil and bad spirits. It has no intention of bringing lightning, and in fact, I think you might find that this particular drought year, most of the bad luck hammerkorps haven't been doing their job very well, because there certainly hasn't been the kind of storms that we usually experience. With its long, straight bill, it is a water-dependent bird, moving about the muddy areas, catching animals like freshwater mollusks that will be throughout these muddy parts, and frogs and tadpoles and little fish, all manner of different prey species. I remember vividly taking on an intern, a trainee called Jürgen from Belgium. He was one of the best trainees I've ever had. He was a wonderful guy. And we were laughing at it. He was busy talking. I was sitting in the back, just watching him take a game drive. And he was talking about the hammerkorp as it flew over the vehicle. And he said, it's bad, it's thought to be bad luck, but of course that's rubbish, ha, ha, ha. And what he didn't know was that I tried to stop him, but I'd watched him drive over a leadwood branch, not just a few moments before that. And as he went to start his car, we just heard this shh, as all of the air went out of his tire. And it was the first time he had to change a flat tire with the car full of fresh-faced volunteers and guests. So every now and again, the hammerkorp does cause a little bit in the way of bad luck, or at least coincidences like that give rise to some strange rumor. Look, who's there? I didn't even see him. I got completely distracted by the hammerkorp. And yes, no name. Yes, somewhat anonymous viewer. No name has said, is there not a hammerkorp nest at Arathusa Dam? And yes, I think there is, around the sort of the southeastern side of the dam, close to those big boer beans. Look at this big buffalo gentleman munching away. I know of at least one hammerkorp nest in the Mulwati. Trying to think if there's any others on Arathusa. I think there's also some along the Mulwanini drainage line, or at least one along there. It's actually, to be completely honest, it's been a little bit of a while since I've explored those particular roads. That is my plan, however, for the afternoon. We will be heading across to Arathusa to catch up with the lovely Nkuhuma ladies, once everybody else there has had a chance to view them, and once the temperatures have cooled down a little bit. According to Brent, there are some distinctly empty bellies in the Nkuhuma ladies. They will be looking for potential snacks. A buffalo bull like him may or may not be of interest with just the 5 ladies. But speaking of the 5 ladies, I sat with Tristan last night and we went through his photographs of the mystery young male that made an appearance around Simbambili and Elephant Plains over the last 2 days. It is 100% absolutely confirmed to be junior. It is most definitely what we now know as the Nkuhuma, or what other guides now refer to him as the Nkuhuma male. Why on earth he decided to come back here is a fascinating conjecture, right in the time when the Birmingham boys are in this slight scuffle with the Salati males pushing further north, and all of a sudden juniors decided to hike in from the east, obviously felt under pressure there, and apparently according to his tracks he went straight to look for the Nkuhumas. I can't say that his reception is going to necessarily be terribly warm. Don't think they'll be all that chuffed to see him, but of course we certainly are. So junior are now on close examination, and I promise you I really checked carefully. The whisker spot pattern on his left side has this beautiful, the top row has this beautiful curve that is totally, it's not unique, lots of lions have whisker spot curves like that, but essentially the photos that Tristan had from when he was with the rest of the pride, and now this young male, you could essentially have copy-pasted on top of each other, because a lion's whisker spot patterns never change. Oh, there's another buffalo coming up and over the hill. So I'm sure they will be sad to hear that Junior's back in the area, like I'm sure most of our audience, thrilled to hear it. It will be very interesting to see how the situation plays out. Coming back to visit. I don't think he'll stay, but there's such a gap at the moment that the Birminghams have got such an enormous territory. Oh, here comes another one. There's a whole group of Duggar boys on their way. And I also strongly suspect that the male that walked over my vehicle tracks yesterday morning and chased the buffalo, I suspect it was him. Now, how interesting is that? Not the end of a story, but the continuation of a story that had not ceased, but certainly moved outside of our area. And hopefully he will decide to return to an area he is most familiar with, which is Djuma. Junior, for those of you who have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, because I've just realized that I've totally assumed knowledge here, is a roughly 3.5-year-old male that was present when I first arrived here within the Nkuhuma Pride. He was the son, most likely, again, you never know, but most likely the son of one of the Matimba males. And he was on his way, he was at that age where it was time for him to leave the Pride. And with the chaos that was the Birmingham boy takeover, I think we were all particularly concerned for his safety, as were the females. And in fact, one female died, and we'll never know exactly why, but probably in protecting him and the two sub-adult females. Ooh, buffalo not showing great agility, but I suppose when you're 900 kilograms, close to 2,000 odd pounds of animal, walking down a steep hill like that can be something. Well, it's important to make sure that they don't injure themselves on a descent like that. And moving up from, he does actually also have a slight limp. He's walking very carefully. Now, a dam like this, with a hamako wandering about, will provide a whole little individual ecosystem of its own. And Austin, watching in Texas, is curious about one particular aspect of that, which is the amphibian life of this particular area. The answer is we've got a tremendous number of different frog species, some exceptionally beautiful, Austin. This particular year, we haven't really heard them as much as we usually do. Usually, the Djuma Dam and the surrounding areas would be an almost deafening cacophony of different frog calls. Did you breathe in a fly, Jeandre? You just see him turning puce at the back. Jeandre, of course, being the consummate professional cameraman, he's really making sure he doesn't make a sound. So, Austin, we do get different types of frog. Let's say, for example, the banded rubber frog. I think Brent might have the frog book, so he might be able to show you a couple of his favorite species. My favorite species, Austin, if you want to have a quick look, if you want to try Google it, is the bushveld rain frog. So if you want to have a look at that, They are fascinating, grumpy-looking frogs that are highly entertaining to watch after the rains. Tree frogs are also lovely. You've got a whole wide range of them. One thing we don't get in here in terms of amphibian life is that of any newts or salamanders. They do not occur in this area. And speaking of amphibians, they're not amphibians per se, but there are some, you could almost describe them as amphibious creatures swimming in the dam. There's a couple of terrapins, so not amphibians, but falling under the chelonian heading. And every now and again, if you watch carefully, Austin, you'll see heads coming up and bobbing about the surface as they swim about, looking again like the hammerkop for any small mollusk-like species, or maybe a crab even. There you go. There's one paddling about now. Looks like a turtle, but far more able to walk about on land. There's another one paddling about. They are the in-between part between a turtle and a tortoise. Tortoise being a land animal with feet, turtle being a sea animal or an open water animal with flippers, and a terrapin having webbed feet and being somewhere in between. So not an amphibian, but capable of breaching that gap between land and water. The oxpeckers all, every now and again, darting down to have a drink at the dam. It's exceptionally thirsty work eating 1,000 ticks a day when the ticks are salty and dehydrating. So all in all, just a little scene like this. A drying up dam has a whole fascinating ecology behind it. But it's time for us to, oh, there come the mouse birds. Are they going to land here? I've seen far more mouse birds. Well done, Jean-Andre, that was awesome. Those were the red-faced mouse birds, and I've seen lots more of them over the last few days than I have in recent months. I think because the guari bushes are fruiting at the moment, and they're all enjoying the guaris and white berries that Jean-Andre didn't really like too much, but the mouse birds certainly do. Let's head back across to Brent, find out how he's doing, and I will continue to search for the wonders of the African bush.
So, we're just checking, we're right on the boundary of the Kruger National Park, and there's this wonderful little river system. And I just wanted to make sure that she hadn't utilized one of these nice trees. She hasn't. So I just had a chat to Mike from Cheetah Plains, and he was saying that she quite often goes into this very thick little river system near Cheetah Plains Pan, and I might just head back towards there to go have a little walk in there. So this area where we are at the moment, as you can see, it's relatively open, so there's only a few places she might store a kill. We've checked carefully around here now. Oh, and look, we have an alarm system already installed in this area. Hello, monkeys. So that's really good for us. See that guy there. So that means if she moves anywhere close to here, these guys will spot her and shout from the treetops to let us know. So, hello, Aaron from the land of the long white cloud. And for those of you not sure where that is New Zealand. Home of the kiwi bird, but not the kiwi fruit. Now, Aaron would like to know, these cubs, are they also possibly fathered by Tingana? I'm not sure whether she was seen mating with Tingana, but it is possible. and she is towards the edge of Tingana's range. She does come into his range in Torchwood a bit. It is possible, but with all leopard cubs, it's near impossible without genetic testing to tell exactly who the father is. So we'll have to collect some fecal samples and then hopefully work it out from there. Now there's also a very strong possibility these cubs are fathered by an unknown male leopard from the Kruger National Park. Let's go next one. Okay, so we're going to head back towards Cheetah Plains Plan, where we first saw those ground hornbills. Go have a stroll into the drainage system. So we've got about, we've got a few minutes more. Is that what I think it is, Brian? Is it what I think it is, Brian? Where am I binoculars? It is what I thought it was. You see what I think it was? I just saw some dust rising. There's a big herd of buffalo. Well, let's take a moment to enjoy the buffalo before we continue our search for Nkani. We are at the tail end of the buffalo. So Chai Girl would like to know, would Cheetah Plains increase the chances of seeing caracal? Not really, I don't think. Maybe increase the chances of seeing serval more often, but not necessarily caracal. Hello, buffaloes. Are you heading towards, where are you heading towards to have a drink? These buffaloes walked out of the Kruger. Oh, you can see that little one there, Brian. I'm just going to stop. That's a very young buffalo, a couple of days old. So this is what I was talking about. We're going to get this movement, especially these big herds of buffalo coming in from the Kruger into Cheetah Plains, and especially as it gets colder and drier. And this is going to attract lions as well. So who knows whether an unknown pride of lions might meander out of the park following a herd of buffalo. Andreen was wondering when we were going to see buffalo on Cheetah Plains, and the answer, Andreen, is today. Probably about 150 or so in this herd that I can see so far. There could be a few more, I can't see. Down to that baby frame. Old cow. It's amazing how these big buffalo herds picked up condition so quickly after a very dry spell we had. A bit of greenery. We were very happy. Flows. Okay, look at that. Majority of the herd crossing off to the right of us. Now they might head towards the Cheetah Plains pan for a drink. They're not quite there yet. So, a big herd like this quite often needs to drink twice a day. And they normally drink in the morning and in the late afternoon, evening. And lions are great followers of buffalo herds. So they literally attract lions to them. The sound of a big herd of buffalo moving through. Definitely looking forward to some lion and buffalo interaction on Cheetah Plains. Nice and open. You can see what's going on for quite a distance. I think it might be quite spectacular. And while these buffalo make their way slowly towards the waterhole, well, they're not really going to the Cheetah Plains waterhole. They might be heading to a little pan that's still holding water that they know about, but we don't. I'm just going to do a quick loop and head back towards that area where Kanyin might possibly be. I'll go quickly across to Jamie with a great grey beast.
You've arrived just in time for this display of sheer strength. Going back to what we were talking about before this, about elephants and their immense capacity for sheer brute force. This particular male on the other side of the drainage line has been demonstrating it with very clear intent in pushing over this particular tree. Aubrey, when he described him to me, Aubrey's just come down this route. Aubrey's description was, maybe don't go there, he's mafufunyan. In other words, he's quite angry. And he's taking out his frustrations on this particular tree. It looks like an apple leaf from where I am. It's quite far away. Come on, boy. There we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's about to go. Sure, there's another tree in the way. It's going to go. It's cracked already. Oh, dear boy. Don't embarrass yourself now. That's definitely not going to improve your temperament. One more go. Rocking back on his heel, considering the different... Oh. There you go. He's considering the problem. And I think he's actually trying to decide if it's not worth pushing from a different angle. Or has he just given up? No, he hasn't. There you go, look at that. Problem solving at work. There was another tree in the way, so he's pushed it from the other side. Isn't that incredible? I mean, it doesn't seem like that big of a leap to us, but it is such a clear example of the kind of thinking that an elephant is capable of. Oh, it's nearly there. Grey hornbills whistling away in the distance as we all hold our breath in anticipating the fall of this tree. Almost that one branch is stuck in the tree behind. Almost. After all that, I don't know if he hasn't bitten more than he can chew, or if he's just taking a little bit of a break in this afternoon heat. Summing up the problem again. Looks like he's going round to the other side. No, I certainly hope he has no desire to come and take that out. I have had a situation before where an elephant failed to push over a tree and got so terribly frustrated and slightly, I mean, it's very anthropomorphic to say that he was embarrassed, but he certainly turned around on me to demonstrate just how big and strong he really is. Okay, different size, different side. Oh, this has become quite the drawn-out process. That other tree behind not doing him any favors. There we go, there we go. Oh, again, catching it. And using its rocking motion to help to provide him with extra force here. It's not an apple leaf, by the way. Just the color of the leaves are slightly wrong. I'm not entirely sure which tree it is at this distance. Push. Come on, boy, we can't leave you until we've seen the end result of this. Oh. Now, he's doing this for two reasons. One is to get to the fresh leaves on the top. The other is because he's a must bull. There we go. And that is that. Donna, you were wondering if he pushes with his head or his trunk. The answer is a combination of both. We do sometimes get to see them as they push over trees, and they place the base of the trunk, they squish it up a little bit. I'm not going to do that. I'm not pulling faces at you or anything, but you sort of get the idea. They squish their nose up against their forehead and then push like that. But I have also seen them do it with the top part of their head, so it could be either one. They usually cushion it with the base of their trunk. It's all over and done, and Brent has found another one of our special cheetah plains creatures. Let's jump on the back with him.
Not something we see every day. It's a pair of ostriches. Now, I've just let one of the guys pass by, so if you do see a vehicle coming through, he's just swinging past. There we go, bye-bye. Thank you, mister. There we go. So they're right on the boundary again, a bit closer than the last time when you saw them with Jamie. But it's not a creature we see too often, or if at all on Djuma. I think there's one recorded case. But now, with access to these big sodic sites and open areas, look at that. A male and female ostrich. Now, the female is the grey one, who's defecating on the right, and quite a sort of grey, dull feather coat. And then you see the male with those black and white feathers. Now, ostriches are quite strange creatures in the way they feed. And they will pick up and eat shiny stones and things, and that ends up in their stomach. And it probably aids them in digestion. But mostly they are grazers. Oh my goodness. Another flock of ground hornbills, Brian. I know they're a very big distance, but it's definitely not the same flock we've just seen. I'll ask Brian to show you quickly. Oh, the male ostrich is going to come out. We'll show you a little later. And if we look at that male ostrich, if we start seeing a red showing on his shins and on his face, that's a very good sign that he's in the breeding colors, and I'm not seeing that red on his shins, so probably not quite breeding yet. see them, Brian? To the right a bit. There they are. There's ground hornbills right in the distance there, feeding on the open area. And there were, I think I saw 6 when I had a look properly in that little flock. Incredible. Back to the ostriches. Now, ostriches, of course, are flightless and way too big to ever get off the ground. Hence, they are incredibly quick on their feet. And someone was wondering how quick they are on their feet. And that was something from Africa. If I remember correctly, they can probably get up to about 60 miles an hour. And we'll double check that for you. Oh, sorry, not 60 miles, but 70 kilometers an hour. About 43 miles an hour. Oh, look there. Actually, we can see he is starting to show breeding colors. Now he's showing us his shins. You can see they're pinkish. He's not quite in full breeding yet. When he's in full breeding, they become almost scarlet. Maybe that's why he's hanging around with a lady. There could be a few more around in those bushes we can't see. There is a lone wildebeest to the left of them. Guys, I've just heard a little birdie called Mike in my ear, which means we're going to have to start going on a little bit of a safari, and I'm not going to let you know what we're after. So, what fantastical creature could be down here in the deep south and east? So while you think about what it could be, let's jump on board with Jamie. Oh! We've got to respect the local inhabitants crossing the road. So while we wait for them, a pair of leopard tortoises to cross the road, let's go to Jamie, who's with an elephant.
Job like this, you need to have eyes all over the show to keep an eye out for different things, whether it be for tortoises in the road or elephants surrounding your vehicle. And in this case, we have reconnected with our elephant herd from earlier, whilst I've been slowly making my way across to Arathusa and the possibility of the Nkuhuma lionesses. For those of you who just needed a quick reminder, we will be doing another school drive this afternoon. So we're just waiting for them to jump on board. And once they do, then we will be just taking some of their questions. It's one of my favorite things about our safariLIVE initiative, to be able to reach people across the planet, but most especially that we have this ability to be used as a learning tool for the kids of both sort of prep school and high school age. Look at this little one with his tusks just starting to come through. And that is something that is uncomfortable for them, or at least from what we can tell, it is an uncomfortable experience for them, just like teething with young children. That itchy, sore, scratchy feeling that we feel when we grow teeth is probably something that they experience as well. Luckily for them, the adults have a wide range of medical treatments for it. Alrighty, so A very warm welcome to the Cox School, and this is Clark's biology class. And we're starting off our particular school drive this afternoon, your morning, with one of the most iconic African animals. Just a quick introduction, my name is Jamie, and I sit in the front and I guide you about out here. I have a gentleman sitting behind me. We'll go with that. I have a gentleman sitting behind me, and that's Jeandre. He's giving me a thumbs up and a grin. He operates the camera, and essentially what we do is what's happening here is what you are seeing on your screens at the moment. So it is entirely live. Everything that you're seeing is happening in the Greater Kruger National Park area of South Africa. Some of you might have Googled it beforehand. Some, I imagine, not. So if you want to have a look, you can Google Djuma, Arathusa and Cheetah Plains Game Reserves in the Sabi Sands in the Greater Kruger National Park area of South Africa. Sorry, Jeandre. Jeandre is an absolute gentleman, by the way. Right, let's shuffle forward a bit and get another view of them. Now, African elephants are one of my favorite animals to sit with. They are majestic and a very long-lived animal species. So an elephant can live up to 40 years, up to 60 years, but usually around 40 to 50 years of age. And during that time, they acquire an incredible amount of knowledge. A female will spend her entire life within the safety of a herd, and I'm looking at this tiny little one at the back there. Hello, guys. There you go. Now, this little one is probably, this little female is about just over or close to a year in age, maybe a little bit younger. But Chloe, you were wondering, how big is a baby elephant when it's born? And the answer is big, although they certainly look incredibly tiny when compared to the adults. Baby elephant is born at around 100 kilograms in weight, which equates to about 220 odd pounds. So definitely not a small baby by human standards. But when you think that mom could be anywhere in the region between 3 to 4 tons, so 6,500 pounds right up to close to 10,000 pounds, you get an idea that just how proportionately tiny a little baby elephant is. And she will have, or he will have, a tremendous amount of growing to do from when they are born right up until they reach the end of their lifespan. Okay, girl. She's just swinging her head ever so slightly, letting me know that she wants a bit more space. Oh, that little boy changed his mind as he runs behind mom. As I said, an elephant will continue to grow throughout its life. And Eric was wondering, can an elephant knock down whole trees, and how much do they weigh? And it's such a pity that you just jumped on board now, or at least that the timing worked out the way it did, because an elephant, just a few moments ago on our screens, pushed over a tree of roughly the size of the tree in front of us. It was a marula tree that it took him a while, admittedly, but that he pushed and snapped right at the base of the trunk. Their strength is absolutely incredible to watch. And yes, they do it. Most of the time they do it in order to have access to the fresh green leaves at the top. I said that elephants continue to grow throughout their lives. The females are always a little bit smaller than the males, but a big male elephant in the prime of his life, over 40 years old, can weigh up to close to 6 tons, about 13,000 odd pounds in weight. Absolutely enormous animals, and of course the largest land mammal. See how they are flapping their ears. That's one of the ways that they are cooling down, because when you are that big, your surface area to body ratio is actually quite small, so heat loss is very difficult, which is why they've got those vast ears. that act like air conditioning units. Then, of course, there's also the matter of feeding or maintaining such a body weight. That's one of the reasons why they eat almost constantly throughout their day. We have a question about how they feed and how they get the food that they need. They eat a mixture between grass and trees, so they're a mixture of grazers and browsers, as well as every now and again digging up bulbs and the like. So Cameron, you were wondering about how they feed, and the answer is with their trunks, always. The trunk is used as a way of transporting the food from the leaves or the grasses into the mouth. And as I said, they have to eat almost constantly to, or at least when they're adults, to maintain their body size. And watching an elephant's coordination with their trunk is an incredible thing out here. Sometimes what they'll do is they'll pull the leaves like that and put it into the mouth with the trunk. Sometimes they'll pull the branch towards them and put the whole branch in their mouth. Sometimes they use their tusks to scrape away, for example, if they're trying to dig a bulb out, or if they are trying to get to what is known as the cambium layer of trees. Now, all trees, as I'm sure you know, have those xylem and phloem network systems that run up below the first layer of the bark. The xylem carrying water and the phloem carrying nutrients. Both of those things are exceptionally valuable to a feeding elephant, particularly in times of drought such as this. And believe it or not, although it looks incredibly green, we are in the grips of a drought that is probably the worst that we've seen in close to 20 years, if not more so. See those long eyelashes? And you see the way that that elephant just pushed through the bushes? Those are to protect its eyes. Oh, panic! Little one behind, with its tail out, racing about. I love little elephants. They're definitely some of my favorite things to spend time with. Now, Gabby, you were wondering a little bit about the knowledge and the training that we have in order to do this particular job. And we've all come to it through different routes, different training options, but essentially we are all united by a passion and a love, and the knowledge that we gain and the experience that we have is because of the fact that we all, I think, as guides and as presenters in this particular area, cannot imagine doing anything else. So in my case, I actually didn't start off my educational life doing this. After I finished school, I worked on a reserve in the Kalahari. I then went on to do a law degree. As you can see, my legal career is blossoming. And as soon as I finished with my law degree, I went straight into training, doing what was known as the level 1. So you get different levels, you get different qualifications, and it's entirely up to the guide how they approach that. But I was trying to work it out the other day in terms of acquiring this knowledge base and acquiring this experience. Even just doing 6 hours of game drive, maybe 8 hours of game drives. We work every single day of the week. So we'll work for 6 weeks on without a weekend break. We'll drive over the weekends, Saturdays, Sundays, public holidays. But we do get a very good leave system. So after every 6 weeks, we have 2 weeks off. But let's say that equates to about 250 days spent in the bush with a minimum, absolute minimum of, let's just go through here nice and slowly because this is going to be beautiful. A minimum of about 8 hours spent driving about. Hey, would you look at that? Sorry, I know that we've got this beautiful view, but they've actually been digging in this drainage line, getting water out. That's so cool to see. Hello, boy. Poof. Yes. There you go, that little head shake. Webb, you were wondering, are elephants aggressive animals? No, not unnecessarily so, not more so than any other animal. They're not governed by human emotions or morals, but they are not at all aggressive. Certain responses, sometimes they show aggressive behavior to each other, sometimes they get scared by us, and a lot of the time elephants' responses to people and the damage that they can do to people are done through fear. sort of not giving an elephant as much personal space as one should. Well, those two boys squared up to each other, but they decided not to have a little tussle. And one of the things that makes elephants scary as a concept is, although they might not be any more aggressive than any other animal, they are big. They are very, very big, and they are capable of doing damage to vehicles and to people. It's very important not to see them as aggressive, but to see them as animals that deserve absolute and utmost respect. We live in their home. You certainly wouldn't go into somebody else's house and invade their personal space and chat noisily and point and stare at them and make a rowdy noise. And it's important to treat the animals here with just the same amount of respect. Young boys like this especially are full of teenage hormones, so that's why they are busy fighting with each other. Our camera's picked up on the fact that some of the elephants haven't got tusks. In this particular herd, it's only the babies that haven't yet started to grow their tusks. As you can see, these young boys have got tusks that are growing through, and tusks are modified teeth. They are modified in sizes, and they're currently using them to battle with each other. Or you're at a distinct disadvantage, little one, you're on a downhill. I'm just going to be quiet for a moment so you can hear them tussling. Look at that dust all over the place. So Cameron, an elephant has milk tusks just like we have milk teeth when they are young. It's hardly ever visible though. And it's only at about 3 years of age that they start to grow them. Now these boys don't have enormous tusks because they haven't had time for those tusks to grow to be enormous. Somebody wanting to give up the game and not really having an option. So an elephant's tusks will go throughout its life. There's a very small, about a 4% natural occurring percentage of elephants that do not grow tusks. And unfortunately, in certain parts of Africa, that is a physical or a genetic trait that has been artificially selected for by the poaching problem. And what it means is that 4% was the naturally occurring number. That's now reduced, or that's now increased to around 30% in certain areas. Look at this little mischief. What are you planning on doing, mister? Are you terribly intimidating? Oh, so scary. A young male that wants to get involved in the fight with the older males, but is a little bit too small, so can't really do that. And so he thought he'd come and wave his head and his trunk about and just test just how scary he really is. Sightings like that are so very entertaining. Now, Cameron, with the tusks, with the little males, you were wondering about how long a tusk could actually grow. And the answer is absolutely enormous, up to 6 odd feet in length. Now, Cameron, there's a wonderful museum in the Kruger National Park called Letaba, or it's within the Letaba camp, and it has records of the... What are you trumpeting at? Oh! Very upset somewhere there. Now, it's got records of some of the most magnificent tuskers, and they're called, elephants with big tusks are called tuskers because, just like with people, we've got different physical traits. Some elephants are genetically programmed to have enormous tusks. Some are genetically programmed to have very small tusks. And this particular museum is dedicated to some of the largest elephants. There was Mafufunyan, and now, for the life of me, there was Djuma. I can't remember the others, but there's a whole list of them. And those tusks, some of those tusks, just one tusk weighs about double what I weigh, close on to 200 odd pounds. So they are can be exceptionally enormous and very, very long. And that's only really in the males. It's only really the males that get to that extent and that kind of thickness. I'm talking tremendous girth of those teeth. And they are just that. They are ivory teeth, modified in sizes. So they can grow enormous. Unfortunately, big tuskers have become less and less common. And part of the reason behind that, although it's something that doesn't occur in this particular area very frequently, we don't have a massive problem with it, but a lot of that has been throughout Africa due to the poaching of the elephants for their ivory. One of those tremendously sad losses. As we shuffle our way up nice and quietly, and again, it's always important to respect the boundaries of an elephant's personal space. And this is actually quite a nice angle because we get to look from a lower level than we might usually. These animals have got trying times ahead of them. It's one of the reasons why they have been a bit more stressed out than usual. We are, as I said, in the grips of the worst drought that has been seen at least in the last 20 years, probably the last 100 years. David was wondering about the potential effects of climate change on this area. Now, David, there's quite a long explanation behind it, the reason behind this drought and the lack of rain that we've had. But a part of that can be referred to the effects of climate change. And just to give you an idea of just this one particular drought, we've had hardly any insect life. We have had it in the last few weeks just because there was a little bit of rain, but there was hardly any insect life. The migratory birds have all left far earlier than we would usually see them leave. So the bird species like cuckoos, woodlands kingfishers, even the white storks that fly all the way up towards Europe, those have all moved on far sooner than I've experienced it in a normal year with a normal rainfall pattern. Now, we're very fortunate in the area that we are. This is 4 million hectares of unfenced conservation area. 4 million hectares equates to roughly 4 million football fields. The size of this particular area is almost incomprehensibly large for a wildlife reserve. So these elephants will be able to cope with because the larger the area, the more an elephant can move, the more distance they can travel, the more they can adapt. But it is something that is going to hit them hard over the next few weeks. Look at this calf suckling. Oh. Mom decided now is not time for lunch. Now, Webb, I've mentioned just having total respect for the animals of this area. You were wondering if the vehicles impact or upset the animals in any way. The answer is, do they upset them? Do we upset them? No. For the most part, absolutely not. Most of these animals have gone from birth up until the age that they are now with safari vehicles moving around them with guests. So it's something that is as much a part of their natural environment as the grass and the trees and the leaves. Do we have the potential to scare them? Yes, absolutely. If you drive into their personal space, if you go too fast, if you rev your car too loudly, make too much of a noise. Do we have absolutely no impact on the animal? No, absolutely not. Now, we cannot possibly claim that we don't have some kind of an impact. For elephants, it's actually fascinating because, in my personal opinion, the babies very often love having us come around because they don't have to feed as constantly as the adults do because they've got access to mom's milk, and they've got all of this learning process happening within those gigantic brains of theirs. And a human arriving with the vehicle is a really nice opportunity to spend some or have some extra and additional entertainment. Now, a human being on foot is a very different thing. Being on foot is a very different thing, just to finish off that answer. We are an apex predator. Every single animal out here recognizes or responds to the human bipedal, so the upright stance on two legs form, with a certain degree of fear. That can be slowly habituated out of them, but almost every single animal here, if I were to get out of the car now and to walk towards these elephants, they would absolutely, chances are they would run away from me. 9 times out of 10, it would be afraid of me. But Cameron, just to go back as we watch these guys feeding along the grass, you were wondering what kind of food. Oh, and Hannah as well. Sorry, Hannah. Hannah and Cameron were wondering about what kind of food an animal like this would need to sustain growth. An elephant, when it's born, is solely reliant on its mother's milk, as of course with most mammal species. They are weaned relatively late. It can take up to 1.5 years before they stop suckling, but they will start to eat solid food, just like toddlers, at about 6 months of age, usually the softer grass species. And from there, elephants are incredibly adaptable in terms of the food that they eat. And they are actually, I've been so distracted watching them, I haven't realized quite how far they've managed to get from us. We should go forward a little bit. So they're very, very adaptable feeders. They can eat most of the tree species out here, grasses, tubers, root systems, and bulbs, so orchid bulbs, anything like that will fall into their menu. As I said, the stripping away of bark to get to that cambium layer is a very important resource, particularly in winter or in dry seasons. So that's something that they're going to focus on more and more as we go further into this drought. Now, the fascinating thing about the way that an elephant feeds and maintains its growth and its body bulk, I said they have to continue eating throughout the day. Essentially, that's basically what they do with their day, is feed. Unless they're young, then they might play a little bit. But the fascinating thing about that is just think about the impact that chewing constantly for 22, 23 hours a day, because they don't need to sleep for as long as we do, just think about the impact that that has on their teeth. An elephant has a fascinating approach to dealing with this. They have 4 molars in their mouths at any one time, but those molars wear down, and they essentially replace them once they have worn down. But they can only replace those molars once or 6 times throughout their life. Once they reach that 6th set, which is around 50 years of age, once that 6th set of molars has worn away, they find themselves struggling to chew their food properly. And that's one of the reasons why elephants will actually reach the end of their lifespan when they do. Most older elephants start to slowly lose condition because they're not digesting their food as well as they would like to. And you get more and more. And already an elephant's digestive system is quite an ineffective thing. They excrete or defecate at least 1/3 of what they eat. So once they reach that 6th set, they go and they feed off the soft food in the riverbeds. And that's actually where stories about elephant graveyards come from. The idea that a lot of older elephants die around rivers where they've gone to get soft food. And when those rivers flood, they collect the bones all in one place. So elephants don't necessarily go to one place to die. They don't go wandering off and target a specific spot. Patty, you were wondering, as we watch these elephants, a little bit about their sensory development. You were wondering if they see color or only in black and white. And their eyesight is not nearly as good as ours, especially during the day. Their vision is not completely grayscale. So although it is almost essentially black and white, they do see splodges of certain colors. As far as I know, that excludes the blues and the greens. And they might see a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, but it's a very different style of vision than we experience. Hello, boy. What you doing? You're straggling. The elephant, far more reliable on its sense of hearing and its sense of smell. Those are the dominant senses within an elephant. Look at all of the scratch marks around his ears from where he's walked through the trees. I'm going to let this gentleman wander on past me. I'm going to head off in search of one of Africa's other iconic animals. And while I head across in that direction, let's find out what Mr. Brent is up to.
So we have found the most incredible bug. And it's actually the larval stage of an insect. I'm just trying to get him to turn his head a little bit for us there. Now, just judging from the shape, it's either a hawk moth larvae or a swallow-tailed butterfly. Now, you can turn a little bit more, just that. Now, you can see he's got a very distinct eye. Now, if I were a predator and I hit him a little bit, attacked him a bit, he's not doing it now, he's got used to me, but he squashes his neck in and he mimics this head of a snake. Isn't that incredible? That's his defense mechanism. Amazing little creature. Now, we're actually in search of lions at the moment. We heard calling very close to where we are. But while we were going, I just happened to notice this critter crossing the road. You can see quite a few of the hawk moths have this very distinct little, almost rat's tail that sticks out. Now, it's very difficult often to find moth and butterfly, the exact species. Well, I'm going to keep trying to identify this guy. I'm going to let him look at me. Maybe it'll come to me. But we're going to keep looking for the lions that we're calling in this area. Christina's wondering, what is the temperature at the moment? And
it seems as though Brent has just gone through something of a difficult signal patch, and that is all part and parcel of basically bringing a live safari to you all in this kind of environment. As you can imagine, the technology involved certainly beyond my understanding, but the technology involved is intense. I want to show you something. It's not the freshest example, but it's a nice example to go back to our discussion about elephants feeding. I'm going to do a quick scan. I don't think there's any elephants around me. We haven't gone far from them. They are just behind us. To show you something about elephants feeding. So this isn't very fresh. This is relatively old, but it does give you a nice example of the way in which, first of all, they have stripped a branch from here. You can see here where they've pulled it, you can actually see. You can imagine an elephant grabbing part of the tree and pulling and stripping away a branch here. And here they've actually, move it down a little bit. Here you can see where the ends have been chewed. So those have gone straight into the elephant's mouth and it's munched away a little bit on it and then dropped it, decided that they were done with that part. And then if we go to the base of this particular branch, of this particular bush willow tree, have a look at this. Remember how we discussed about the cambium layer being one of the most important food items for an elephant during a drought or during winter, our dry season? This bark has been completely stripped away from the heartwood. They've gone munching away, and what they do essentially, it's fascinating to watch. It's like a conveyor belt. I'm not an elephant, but I kind of want to give you the idea. So they'll take it, they'll put it in their mouth like this, and they move their jaw down it, all the while using that very flexible trunk to hold the one side, and just strip away the bark until you end up with all that's left being this. This is a little bit old, it's a little bit sandy. You can even see from where the tooth, the sort of the food matter that had been crushed by the teeth is wound up around the branch, around the bark of the branch. But there you go, just to finish off our discussion. And like everything out here, a big animal like this will leave all kinds of tracks and signs. And tracking an animal is not just about its footprints. It's not just about the marks in the sand that the feet leave behind. It's about the impact of every single aspect of its behavior and the way that the impact that it has on the world around it. And in the case of an elephant, that impact is absolutely enormous. 300 kilograms of food for a big elephant. we spoke before about elephants being aggressive, and I said they're not necessarily aggressive, except in certain circumstances. It's important to remember that they are wild animals and they have the potential to be dangerous. And certainly respect and caution will get you 99% of the way, but occasionally things do just happen that are a little bit outside of your control. You come around the corner and there's an elephant there and he's upset with you. We do have a question about the predators of the Sabi Sands and whether or not we've ever felt threatened. So Annie and Matt, you were wondering about that. Threatened by predators? Abby and Matt, you were wondering about whether we've ever felt threatened. Yes, if my complete honest answer is yes, I have in the past. There is, when you first learn to guide and when you first spend time walking in the bush, there is an instinctive atavistic response, so a very primitive response to us. Because when a lion goes brr, when a lion properly growls at you, it is a sound that is indescribable and that takes you back to some kind of instinctive fear. And it's very important at moments like those to remember to never, ever, ever run away in a situation like that. There is hardly ever a circumstance in the bush where you should ever run because you trigger that chase instinct. So that's one of the most important ways of preventing a serious incident with one of the predators. With lions, if you are being charged on foot, the trick is to stare them down and to actually make yourself look as big and as scary as possible. With leopards, it's a little bit more complicated. A lot of the time, my approach has been to try and pretend I haven't seen them and to walk away as quickly as possible, to walk around them without looking directly at them. So two very different responses. But for the most part, predator attacks are incredibly rare. We spend quite a lot of time tracking on foot, and occasionally we do bushwalks with our cameraman, and then we do make sure that we are well protected. And the most important part of that protection is to be constantly aware, constantly on alert, and constantly overcautious. You never ever want to approach an animal, you never want to take risks when approaching an animal on foot. In the vehicle, a predator is not really a threat. There are the occasional very limited circumstances. For example, there was the leopard that grabbed one of the safari guides in Kruger by the arm last year. That was a very, very small exception to a general rule. That leopard was very ill. There were problems with that leopard. But for the most part, the predators of the Sabi Sands are so accustomed to having vehicles move about them that it's just part, as I said, of their day-to-day life. And we're very lucky that our camera crew is also exceptionally professional. With Jean-Andre sitting on the back, he takes a slightly higher position. He's slightly more in the animal's eye line, and it's something the animal will be keeping a closer eye on him. But our cameramen know exactly how to act around the bigger animals. In my experience, it's far less about the predators and more a caution of particularly hippopotamus in this drought session, in this particular drought time, and buffalo. Now, Hannah, you were wondering if I have a favorite animal that I like to follow. It's so difficult, Hannah. I always enjoy spending time with elephants. They've always relaxed me. They put me in the most incredible mood. Even when they are feeling a little bit feisty, it's still an incredibly privileged feeling to experience. Now, my personal feeling, I've spent quite a lot of time with rhino in my life. Now, we at WildEarth do not show rhino due to the poaching problem. We do not want to make things any easier for the poachers of the world to find out where they are. It's also a statement against rhino poaching. There's one of my favorites. I'm going to get back to this question just to tell you what this antelope is, because you might have absolutely no idea. This is a kudu. K-U-D-U. A kudu. One of the larger antelope species, and in my opinion, one of the most graceful and beautiful. Yes, I'm talking about you, big girl. The females are completely hornless. The males have these glorious spiraling horns that extend up to 1.5 meters, so 4 to 5 feet above their heads. Much bulkier in size. They're part of a family of antelope species known as the spiral-horned antelope species. What sets our antelope apart from the deer that you might have seen around the States or around America is one of the biggest things is their horns. Of course, the female in this case doesn't have horns, but certain antelope species, the female does have horns, and horns are permanent, unlike antlers. They are made of solid bone with a keratin sheath that wraps around it. And once it starts growing from the top of their head at a couple of months old, it will continue to grow for the rest of they will continue to grow for the rest of their lives. In deer, those antler bases are made of modified and solidified blood vessels. A very different thing, but essentially, deer and antelope fill the same ecological niche in both the African bush and the Americas. Usually, when you see one kudu, when you stop for one kudu, there's usually a whole load more somewhere in the bushes, but I don't think I see any. Let's go forward a little bit. Perhaps there are some. Hello, gorgeous. Thanks, girl. As we drew up to this particular sighting, she was in the process of licking her nose, and Michaela was wondering about how long this particular antelope's tongue is and what they eat. Our kudu is largely a browser, which means her diet consists mainly of leaves of trees. She might, on the odd occasion, just because for some reason the animals refuse to read the biological textbooks, she might every now and again have a nibble on some grass, and I've even seen giraffe eating grass before, and they're meant to feed only on leaves. But her diet consists largely of various leaves of various trees, a lot of bush willow in this particular area, and her tongue is probably extends about 10 or so centimeters outside of her mouth, if not a little bit longer, let's say 15, which is, if you'll forgive my very poor conversion rate from metric to imperial, probably somewhere in the region of about 7 or so inches. Giraffe, on the other hand, and we could well see a giraffe, there are lots of them about at the moment, a giraffe's tongue extends for up to 1/2 meter. So 50 centimeters, that is, 1/2 meter is 1.5 feet in length. And that dexterity allows it to, like an elephant's trunk, wrap around the different leaf species that it wants and to strip them away from the branches. And she's actually disappeared off, and I am on my way somewhere. I'm hoping we're going to get there in time. Now, to go back to the question before we stopped for the kudu, about my favorite animal to spend time with. Now, my favorite predator is a spotted hyena. So, Hannah, I really enjoy spending time with spotted hyena, particularly at their den site with all of the cubs dashing about. That being said, there is a rarer predator out here that all of us get exceptionally excited when we see. And Webb, you were wondering about the rarer animals of this reserve. Yes, there are some very rare animals. There are some critically endangered animals. Now, the wild dog, the African wild dog, is South Africa's most endangered predator species. It's the second most endangered canid in Africa. There are under 500 left in South Africa alone, and within this Kruger National Park, the majority of that particular animal occurs here. There's between 194 to 197 individual wild dogs running around here. And that's just because wild dogs, for an incredible duration of their life, they have been considered to be vermin to be exterminated, particularly in farming sort of social circles. And it's only recently that really serious concerted efforts have been made to conserve them. And there's one other animal that is exceptionally rare. I haven't seen one yet, but I know that they occur here. And that is a pangolin. Now, a pangolin, and I'll leave it up to you guys when you're done with this class to Google what a pangolin looks like. It looks like somebody put a kind of a curse or a spell on an artichoke, or possibly a pine cone, sort of a walking pine cone. It's a scaly anteater of about this big, really, really wonderful, very secretive nocturnal animal, and probably one of the most poached species in South Africa, if not the entire world, to be completely honest. So yes, there are some very rare animals out here. And we are so fortunate to be able to live and to work in an area where they are incredibly well protected. Our web, yes, absolutely. This reserve is protected, and a great deal of effort, work, and money goes into protecting this particular area. Now, it's a fascinating thing because our conservation concepts grow and they change throughout our time or throughout the years. But Webb, no, there's no danger of hunting. Is there a danger of poaching? Yes, there is. And that's because despite best efforts to be able to completely remove that threat of poaching is very, very difficult to do. And to go into at length the reason behind that and to really go into this is we don't really have the opportunity to do. But suffice to say that there are, within South Africa, there's an enormous socio-economic gap. I'll leave it up to you, Webb. There's lots of research available for you to do. The Sabi Sands that we're in at the moment is fortunate. There's resources that will allow for the animals to get the best protection feasible, best protection possible. Now, one of you asked about, do the cars disturb the animals? And I said to you, not necessarily disturb, but they do have an impact. But you understand why it's so important that the animals are comfortable around vehicles. Why? First of all, it's magical for us because we can watch them go about most of the time their wild behaviors without any kind of interference from our vehicles. We can observe their natural behavior. But an animal that can be seen, that is happy and comfortable to be seen by tourists, will mean that more and more tourists will come to watch the animals. And the money that goes in or that comes in from tourists visiting lodges is a crucial part of the animals' conservation and the conservation of this area in general. So can I say that there's absolutely no risk of poaching here? I absolutely can't. Unfortunately, I would love to be able to. And that's not for want of trying or for best efforts, but it is one of the best protected places in South Africa, and for that I am exceptionally grateful. As we slowly make our way onto a different property, in this case a property known as Arathusa, Matt, you were wondering, do we live on the reserve? And yes, we do. We live on the reserve, the cameramen live on the reserve, and of course there's a whole team behind us that you guys don't necessarily get to see on screen, but that play a vital role in the way in which things work. For example, our lovely directors, in this case Kirsty and Rebecca, who are going through your questions and feeding them to me through this earpiece. And we do, we all live here, and we're not the only ones who live here. There's guides and hospitality staff, so the ladies who do housekeeping, clean the rooms, the trackers who help us find or help the lodges find animals, the vast amount of maintenance staff, fixing the pumps, anything like that. So yes, we do all live out here. It's essentially a very, very small, very tight-knit community. We all know each other exceptionally well, as you do, because we spend time, or a lot of time, in a very confined area. And it's one of the things that I absolutely love about being out in the bush like this. But that is one of the reasons why, after 6 weeks, a guide or whoever, whether it be a cameraman or whatever, whoever happens to be working out here, goes on leave and gets out of the reserve, because 6 weeks in a very confined space has the potential for producing cabin fever. It's important to get out and to spend time away from the reserve before returning. Of course, bearing in mind that our mornings in summer start at around 4 o'clock in the morning. We're awake at about 4:45 in summer, and we finish around 7:30, something to 8. They're long days. Nevertheless, a lifestyle that I find, I can't imagine living any other way, let's put it like that. Now just bear with me for 1 second. I need to get onto the Game Drive channel. And while I do, let's head over to Brent. I'm going to take you somewhere that I'm going to keep a surprise.
So we're on what we call smoking hot leopard tracks. Fresh leopard tracks. We're just trying to figure out where this female's gone. So the last track we had was just behind us. So we're just going to check down the road in case she just went off to scent mark territory and then came back onto the road. Oh, we have the elephants have pushed us a little branching our way. Very carefully. Now, the herd of elephants could have spooked her. She might have just done a bigger loop. But when I say smoking hot tracks, these are within the last sort of half an hour. Fresh. There's no insect tracks on top of them. There's no sort of dove tracks, bird tracks on top of them. So sometime in the last sort of hour, she's walked. That we've never seen before, being that we've just started utilizing cheetah plains. Checking in the trees, maybe she's going to kill, or maybe she's come back. There we go, still on her tracks. She's come back to this junction. I'll try to find a nice clear track to show you now. Got that one there, Brian. Okay, beautiful female leopard track. So we're still on her tail. Chloe's wondering what is the distance between Jamie and myself. Oh, probably quite far. Probably about 9 kilometers, 10 kilometers even. I'm right in the south east of the northern Sabi Sands, and Jamie is in the west. So this is where it's important to work as a team with your cameraman. So I got my head glued watching the footprints to see where she might leave, and Brian's checking. Gets a little bit more hard, like things. So a lot of finding animals out in the African bush is also knowing their behavior. So I'm confident that she might just stick on the road. So while it's hard, I'm not going to strain my neck and look at the ground, but I will check again as soon as it gets soft. Hyena tracks around here as well. side, Djuma. We're going in. Jump back on board with Jamie, and hopefully we'll have a leopard for you when we're back.
I'm on my way to taking you to a very special surprise and another one of Africa's iconic animals. Some of you may have already guessed where we're heading, but before we do, I always think it's important to just stop and to take in the view. Unfortunately, this is probably the worst spot I've ever stopped and taken in the view before. There's some trees. There is a tree line and a bush dinner site, in case you were interested in the giant concrete ring. Right, so some very good thinking there on my part. Very well planned. My only defense is that you did rather take me by surprise as Brent's signal disappeared. I'll try and find you a different view, shall I? Or we'll just head across to where I'm planning on taking you. Now, with any sighting out here, with any time that we spend out here, remember how we spoke about respecting the different animals? Now, part and parcel of that is there is a limit to how many vehicles can be with an animal at any one time. And usually, that limit is about 3 vehicles, so 3 vehicles at one sighting. If the guide, in the guide's professional opinion, having 3 vehicles is a bad idea, they will restrict it to 2 or even to 1, or in certain cases, we have completely shut down the sighting totally, so no vehicles can go in there. So it's very much an important reflection of the respect that we have for the animals. Now, in this particular case, one of the reasons why I had to jump onto the Game Drive comms, the Game Drive radio allows us to share each sighting with the other guides, so the other guests have a chance to see what you have found, and you have a chance to see what the other guide has found. But there's a very important procedure in terms of lining up for a particular sighting and spending time at a particular sighting. So what I had to do there was just chat to the other guides and have a chance to ask them whether or not I can make my way in. Luckily for us, I can. Unluckily for us, it's been a while since I've driven down this road. Fairly certain we're on the right way. This is half the fun though. Driving down a road that you kind of know, and you're not lost, but you're not 100% sure exactly which road you're on either. All part of the great adventure. I've decided I've had to take a slightly different route. And that goes back again to the respect thing. The reason why I've taken a totally different route to the one I might have taken directly to this particular animal is because there is a leopard called Shadow. And this particular leopard has brand new cubs. And they are right in the direct route of where we would be going. So we won't be making our way past there. We're going to be giving her plenty of space at this particular time. And it just means that we had to take a slightly more circuitous route to get here. Now, Shadow is a particularly tiny leopard, and that's made very clear in her tracks. But apparently we were looking or talking about leopard tracks with Brent. And Gabby, you were wondering about how you can tell the sex of a leopard by his or her tracks. Most of the time, Gabby, it is done purely by size. Sorry, the impala are calling in here, but I think they're just calling and just making a noise. Oh, we better hurry. Sorry, no time to stop and stare. I hope you're not feeling terribly car sick, but we've got to go. Gabby, with the size, a male leopard's track is very often almost twice the size of the females, so much larger. But that, of course, isn't always the case, because what about a young leopard? Now, in the case of young male leopards, even by about a year old, their feet are slightly bigger. Their tracks are not quite as neat and as rounded as the female's tracks, and proportionately, their toes are larger compared to their back pad, than those of a female. The female's toes are proportionately smaller when compared to the heel of their foot. Now, usually I would stop and draw this for you, but unfortunately I can't. I just have to keep going across through in this direction, otherwise we're going to run out of time and you won't get to see my surprise, and that would be relatively tragic. How's it? How's it, man? Good, and you?
Good.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Just on my way to those Ngala.
Okay, for the second one, maybe just check that you're going to safari.
Awesome, perfect. Sharp, thank you, man. Cheers, guys. The word shop is actually sharp, although it isn't really pronounced like that at all. Shop in South African colloquialisms means good, thank you. Hello. It means a lot of different things, but mostly it means awesome, thank you. Or that I've got it, thank you. As we make our way to this particular sighting, David, on the subject of leopards, you were wondering about leopard territories and whether or not they have feeding territories. Oh, everybody duck, watch your heads. Branches in the road. David, it's not so much feeding territories, although that's part of it, is resource-themed territories, but it's also for access to mating opportunities and to protect their offspring from the attentions of other unrelated leopards. Now, it's difficult because we tend to think of a territory as an area that fits up against another territory like a puzzle piece. That's not really the case. The borders of the territories are very, very fluid. I can smell an elephant somewhere here. So the borders of a territory of a leopard can be quite fluid, but essentially the definition of a territory is an area that is regularly patrolled and defended by the animal concerned. So yes, leopards do have territories. They are territorial. In the case of males, their territories are larger than the females and will overlap with several territories of several females because the males are not territorial towards females. And the females, vice versa, are territorial towards other females. They will keep other females out, but not with the males. And they will maintain their little area. In the cases of females with their daughters, very often what will happen is the daughter will establish her territory next to her mother, often taking or often given part of her mother's territory in that whole process, as is the case, or as was the case with Shadow and her mother, Karula. So a leopard does have a territory. The males are fiercely, once they leave their mothers, they don't tend to have a territory for the first few years after they've left their mothers at about 2. So they move on a regular basis. They are essentially what are known as nomadic males. Sorry guys, I just need to listen to the game drive for a second. They're essentially what are known as nomadic males until they're big enough and strong enough at about the age of 6 to 7 years old to start really competing with another male for territory. And a male that's reached about 12, 13, maybe even around 11, gets a little bit too old and past his prime to defend a territory, and he will then be usurped and kicked out of that area by a younger male. And what that does is it means that the female genetics in an area stay very similar, but the males keep things fresh and create genetic variation. And Jacqueline, with the discussion about the leopard's territories, you were wondering if leopards travel in groups or in packs. And the answer is no, they don't. Leopards are purely solitary. The only time you will see a leopard with another leopard is if they are mating or if it's a female with cubs. Very occasionally, the males and the females meet up outside of that mating period, just because their territories, as I said, the male's territory overlaps, and he doesn't feel the need to chase her away. So occasionally they meet up and they spend maybe a couple of hours together, sometimes share a kill. But for the most part, a leopard far prefers to be a solitary animal, very unlike the lion. The lion is a social predator. And the more the better, the more the greater the chances for success. Cameron H., you were wondering how much a leopard would weigh when compared to a lion or even a baby lion. And just bear with me because I actually need to figure out where the sighting is and I'm not 100% sure and there's nobody there. So just bear with me one moment. They are somewhere here. It's just a matter of figuring it out. But Cameron, in terms of a leopard weight, a female would probably be around 45 to 55 odd kilograms, which is in the region of just over 110, close to 120 pounds. And I'm sorry, I actually can't fully answer your question just yet. I do need to see if I can't figure out where these animals are, and I don't think they're this way. And while I do, I'm going to send you across to Brent so I can concentrate and he can tell you a bit more about leopards and lions and how much they weigh.
So unfortunately, those female leopard tracks headed off into this big area to the north of us here, and is a to get out and track on foot. Now, this time of the day is actually called and that means sort of dusk and dawn, both referred to as crepuscular times. And certain animal species, specifically wild dog and cheetah, it's their favorite time to hunt, that sort of semi-light, before the lions and the leopards really get into the swing of things. It's one of the ways they try to avoid conflict with the bigger predators. Well, we haven't by any means given up on the hunt for leopards. Hi, Cameron. Cameron H. would like to know, how much does a leopard weigh compared to an adult lion? Well, let's start with the males, Cameron. A male lion is the biggest predator we get out here. Now, they can weigh up to 230, 240 kilograms. Normally, however, they're around the 200 kilogram mark, and I'm trying to put that into pounds for you, but my maths is terrible. But just think about it for a second. A lioness, probably on average around 120 kilograms. Now, a big monster male leopard is 90 kilograms, which is around 200 pounds. So a male lion is probably 400 pounds. Yeah, 198 pounds is 90 kilos, and 200 kilograms is then would be, yeah, over 240 pounds. No, 440 pounds, forgive me. So massive difference. And then a big female leopard is probably 55 kilograms, so 120 to 140 pounds. And then the lioness is, of course, probably just under 300 pounds. So vast difference in size. And leopards have adapted to avoid them by climbing trees and taking their food up trees. Michaela's wondering, what is a leopard's favorite food? Now, Michaela, it depends on where they are, but generally a leopard's favorite food is small to medium-sized antelope. So anything that is very small, from a little duiker or steenbok, something as big as an impala. Male leopards, in some cases, will take very big sub-adult kudu. I've even heard of a male leopard taking a baby giraffe that probably weighs more than it. So very, very area specific, a lot of the food requirements as well. So where there are a lot of impala, you'll find impala makes up a lot of the diet. In some areas where there are no impala, springbok, so small to medium sized antelope. Hi Carter. Carter's wondering how rough the terrain is. Now, as rough terrain goes, the Sabi Sands isn't too bad. There are some areas that are quite rough, and it's generally because they're thick rather than the terrain's too steep or too rocky. So we're quite lucky in that regard. During the wet season, we can get some mud and get stuck, but the terrain isn't too bad compared to some other places in Africa. Mia would like to know if I've ever gotten lost considering the size of the reserve. Mia, even if I had, I wouldn't tell you. No, fortunately, I've never been lost in the Sabi Sands. I have been lost in Botswana in a much bigger reserve. Now, it's very difficult to get lost when on a clear night like tonight because we can see the stars and the moon and we can figure out direction from that. And there we go, there's the moon. Well done, Brian. But also, to the west of us, we can't really show you now. So where the sun sets, there's a mountain range, and you can often see them just illuminated in the half light. When you get really lost in the bush, it's on a very dark, cloudy night where you can't see stars, and you can't make out anything around you. So also, if you get onto any high ground, you can actually see the lights of the villages not too far away, and that also helps you with your sense of direction. But I have been lost before in northern Botswana, and another place where let's not say lost, I was temporarily unaware of my exact position, is the way I like to think of it. Where we used to get a lot of the time temporarily unaware of our position was when I was working in the rainforest in Gabon, and there everything looks the same, and you're under a big canopy of trees, so you can't see the sky. As I think I just need to do something quickly to help make my aerial just got bent by a tree. There we go. Now I should be able to hear a bit better. Carter would like to know what is the largest reptile that lives in the reserve. Now, Carter, it is probably the Nile crocodile. A really big Nile crocodile can weigh over a ton, so over 1,000 kilograms. Up here in the north, we don't have any really big permanent rivers, so they're probably a bit further south in the reserve, but the largest reptile is the Nile crocodile. And then the largest snake, probably the African rock python, that can reach about 5 meters in length. I have heard of some being well over 5 meters and weigh sort of 50 to 60 or 100 to 150 pounds a snake. The longest snake is probably still the python, but after the python would be the black mamba. And we do see them quite frequently. Now, they're not black as their name suggests. It's the inside of their mouth that is jet black. And that is a warning system. So often if you disturb them or scare them, they'll puff up their neck and open that mouth, and that black mouth is to say, be careful, I'm dangerous. David is wondering, is my training very different or much different from Jamie, the other guide? Yes and no. It's quite a different one. I'm a bit different. David, I've pretty much lived in the bush my whole life. So I grew up in safari lodges in South Africa and Botswana and Zambia. And then after a brief stint in the city, I moved back to the bush, and I've been living in the bush ever since. So I got a lot of my training when I was a lot younger by the guides and trackers at the lodges that I grew up in. So very different type of training. I learned over a very long period of time from lots of different people. And David, your training never ends. I definitely don't consider myself fully trained. I learn something new every day. And there's always something unbelievable, fantastic to try find and discover, so we can find something new. We've just stopped on this large open area, and being at dusk, it's a good time to have a quick look for cheetah. Now, they quite often like to move through this particular open area. And I did see some ostriches here a bit earlier in the day, and cheetah really like to eat ostriches. Ah, there are the ostriches. You see that? Keep going behind. There. Very far away, unfortunately. Oh, yes, there they are. There's a male and female ostriches and a herd of buffalo. You can hear the starlings around us about to go to bed, the very bright blue birds, but the very, very noisy and raucous call. This is just one of my most favorite times of the day, this and dawn. And the bush is changing. The daytime stars are about to go back to sleep, and the nighttime animals are going to come out. And hopefully we might find you a few of those as it gets dark and use our spotlights. So we're still in search of a predator, and hopefully between Jamie and myself, one of us will be able to find you one. Now, Michaela's wondering, what is the most interesting animal I've ever seen on the reserve? Oh, Michaela. Now that's the question. I've worked quite a few different places in the Sabi Sands, and I'd probably say outside of your more traditional interesting animals, outside your big hairies and scaries, one of my favorite little creatures, and the most interesting little creatures that I've seen is the pangolin, which is, the best way to describe it to you is it's like an armadillo, but it's not. So it's a scaly anteater. Incredibly difficult to see and find. We haven't seen one since I've been at safariLIVE, but Brian and I always have our fingers crossed. So it looks like Jamie's beaten me to the predators. She's got lions on the move, so let's go have a look.
You've arrived just in time to get to see a very brief glimpse of a lioness on the move. Now, they decided at this particular moment that they were going to go walkabout as night falls and hunting time begins. They are looking exceptionally hungry. There they are. Can you see them there? Through the bushes. Awesome. I'm glad we managed to have a chance to see them. They just decided to go walk about as we attempted to get there. Well, there you go, Jasmine. This is actually a whole pride of lions. And yes, they do move about in not what we would call packs, so not like a pack of wolves, but essentially the same thing, which is a pride that is made up of a group of related females and their offspring. Hello. particular pride is on the hunt. David, you were wondering as they head out on the hunt if they are nocturnal predators. And yes, absolutely they are. Bear with me one moment. I'm just going to try and get a slightly different view. David, they will be out hunting at night. And they wander off into the night on the hunt. Going to be saying goodbye to the class of Mrs. Clark at high school. They are disappearing into the night, so this will be our last view. I hope you guys had a wonderful time, and that we will see you on the back of our vehicle once again. So from Jeandre and myself and from all of the WildEarth team, don't forget we do this twice a day, every day. And hopefully we can inspire some love and some interest in this incredible world around us. All right, have a wonderful day to all of you. For the rest of our internet audience, we are continuing on. Unfortunately, we may have to abandon this relatively soon. It is incredibly dense vegetation and they are going to at some point go into hunt mode. I don't want to interfere with them in any way, especially not looking as hungry as they are. So we shall get one last glimpse of which direction they're going in. I can see Tristan up ahead of me. I'm just going to make sure he can tell me to turn off if I need to. Oh, let's not smash our rig. It is really, really densely vegetated in here, and there are other vehicles wanting to come and join us. See if we can't figure out a way through here. Oh, no, I can't get through here. I'm going to send you back across to Brent while I try and figure out my way through here. And I will be back with you shortly.
So we've come back into that area where Canyon might be. Just checking carefully. Also checking in case any weird and wonderful creature comes out of the Kruger. Now also on these nice big open areas as it comes to dark, we might get a chance to see civet, serval, white-tailed mongoose. I think this is the first time I've really driven in the dark in Cheetah Plains, so quite excited. And a fun fact is that we are the only car on Cheetah Plains at the moment. There's no one else. We have it all to ourselves. Now is go back and check the water holes. Now it's a bit darker, maybe something's come out for a drink. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous evening. Beautiful light in the sky. Now let's try and add some creatures in our spotlight. actually feel the temperature drop as we move towards this little river system. Temperature's actually almost perfect at the moment. There's a slight cool bite to the air, but it's still not uncomfortable. For me, a really special part of the African bush only comes alive at night. I've had really amazing sightings, very special moments in pitch blackness out in the bush. Curious one says she always worries that the land is going to fall into the ditch when it's dark. Well, if it does, we will just take out the high lift jack and unstuck ourselves. So don't worry. Hopefully I will see it in the headlights first. But it is one of those things that happens, and it can happen during the day just as easily as at night. I'm more worried about hitting a big stump at night than falling into a hole. Got him there, Brian. There's a little African vagrant butterfly having a snooze. Oh, what else you got there, Brian? Oh, a stink bug. We've hardly had any this year. Look at that, a shield bug. Oh, smelly. Let's hopefully none of them get attracted to my light and fly into me tonight. Well spotted, Brian. So, ooh, I got an eye through there. Let's go have a look. But while we go have a look where that eye is, Tom in Dallas is wondering, is Kruger open to everyone? And are we prohibited or prevented from going there? Tom, it is open to the whole Sabi Sand along the eastern boundary, but we are not able to go there. A lot of these western areas of Kruger are what are called wilderness areas. So there's very few roads, only a couple of maintenance roads for anti-poaching patrolling and things like that. And there's masses of Kruger that are left just for the animals to live out their lives without too much interference. I think that eye was a bush baby, but it was a bit far. Penny's spot on. She could hear a fiery neck nightjar calling. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head out into this big open area to the south of me here, and we're going to stop and listen. Maybe we'll actually get treated to a call I don't think I've ever heard on safariLIVE, but I know James has seen the culprit on his first trip down here, the black-backed jackal. One of my all-time favorite calls. Although my impression wasn't very good. Thought I heard a hyena starting to whoop. here is some upset lapwings. Now, they live on the ground, so it could be something that upset them. Let's just check with the spotlight. No, I think it's just the wildebeest out in the zone there. It's caused them a bit of angst. Some more eyes in the distance there towards the cheetah plains pan. So TAC in California is wondering how big is Cheetah Plains. It's 550 hectares, so 1,200 acres, give or take. My maths and the conversion rate's being horrific. But in hectares, it's 550. Here's the little river system that Ephraim thinks Kanin might be in. So very close to the water at Cheetah Plains hand. Goodness. Now this could be quite special. I'm just going to try to position ourselves in the right area. But there seems to be a big herd of elephants at the pad. Turning off my headlights. Sometimes it's fantastic to listen for a few seconds. Send you a very dull sideline on. Hello, Elise. I can hear a Scops owlet, a fiery-necked nightjar in the distance. The ellies slurping up the water. Little one's having a drink from Mom, and he's already had a drink from the pan. Footsteps on the grass. That low rumble. Oh, Ellie, what have you seen? Let's look just beyond. Check the clearing. The ellie looked like it had seen something, so I'm just checking beyond them. Nope, maybe it heard something. And as these guys disappear off into the darkness, let's go see what Jamie's up to.
Now guys, as you can see, I have left the Nkuhumas moving through a very, very dense block, and mainly I left due to the fact that they are trying to hunt, and the block that we were walking through was incredibly noisy. So we just left them. Sorry, I'm just trying to turn my game drive comms down. It's interesting, the volume button very often swaps around. All of a sudden it's a different volume button to the one that it was yesterday. It's quite fascinating. But yes, we've left the Nkuhumas, and I'm currently taking the long way around Arathusa to avoid Shadow and her cubs that were last seen on Zebra Drive. I don't know, Jean-Ray, that probably won't come out on camera, will it? That water bucket. No, it's a little bit too dark. No. It was a nice idea. There's a lovely spotlight that shines out across the dam, and just as I went in front of it, a waterbuck walked across in silhouette in front of it. And it seems as though they are moving off, so that definitely won't work. But yes, obviously making every single effort to avoid Shadow wherever possible, where she does have her cubs at night. We're fortunate. It's one of the reasons why we prefer to know roughly where a den site is when a leopard has young cubs, because in that way, when you're driving around at night, you can actually completely avoid that particular area if you know that they are around there. So that's one of the reasons why it's nice to know where leopards are. Now, I've just turned off most of my lights as we go past the lodge, so that we don't disturb any guests that might have returned early, or that might not have gone out on game drive. And we'll be taking the long way home this evening. Now, I did see Shadow this afternoon. She's moved her cubs to a road called Zebra Drive, so fortunately, thank goodness, no longer on that main road. She picked a very interesting den site, as did Karula. They've both done that, where they chose a spot on a main road where there's sort of a constant passage of vehicles. It's absolutely fine when it's safari guides, but there's also all kinds of delivery trucks, electricians, and so on. I think we're all considerably, as a general guide body, we're very relieved that she's decided to move them away from there. The lovely lights of Arathusa have passed, so I can turn mine back on. And let's see what other wonders we can find as night descends. We'll just have to wait for tomorrow morning to find out if Nkuhumas were successful. Now, one of the exciting things, as we've spoken about before, about the Cheetah Plains experience, is that it gives us a chance to follow up with all kinds of characters that you guys as regular viewers have got to know over the years, but have since made themselves absent. And I am, of course, talking about Karula's previous litters. And in this case, Kathy has a question about Kunuma, who is a male from Karula's litter prior to these ones, and obviously prior to the ones that she lost before that. And Kathy, you were wondering, is there any news about Kunuma and where he's gone? You were saying that you miss him. Now, from what I understand, Kunuma was an incredibly charismatic leopard. I only ever got to see him once. I arrived just as he was essentially dispersing and moving about on his way. So I missed out on the character that was Kunuma, or is Kunuma. He's still, Kathy, as far as we know, he is still alive and well. He is occasionally seen on Cheetah Plains in Chitwa. It seems as though, from what I understand, he might be moving further south into Mala Mala. That's where he's disappeared. He hasn't remained in the area in the same way quarantine has. But that being said, they do still have the occasional sighting of him, and hopefully that will be something that we can look forward to in the future as well. I know that he is Brent's favorite leopard, and Brent told me a lot about him before I arrived, so I've heard some very entertaining stories. I just haven't really managed to meet the character that is Kunuma. So Kathy, that's something I'm looking forward to, and hopefully for those of you who've been regular viewers over the years, we'll be able to bring you that update. Sorry, getting rid of my hat was surprisingly tricky there. Right, let us make our way towards the Arathusa airstrip. Nice open area like that. You never know who might be wandering around at night. Dan, you were wondering about our radio terminology and the fact that you can't find the translate that translates Ngala to lion. Dan, first of all, you might want to check spelling. There is a silent, not quite silent N, Ngala, Ngala. However, it is not a word that is actually the local translation of lion in this area. It is a word that has come to be utilized as part of game drive. What's the word? Not vocabulary. What's the word where you... Terminology. Thank you very much, Andre. I really don't know what I would do without you. Terminology. It's game drive terminology. It's more Zulu and Xhosa in origin, so further south of the country. And in fact, for most of this region, the languages spoken in this region, we're sort of in the Shangaan area. And if you move further to the west of where we are, you start going into the Sotho and Sepedi areas, where a lion is actually Tau. T-A-U, not Ngala, it's Tau. Now, a lot of the words are very similar in the various dialects of South Africa, not dialects, the various languages of South Africa. So, for example, Ingwe, in different forms, either way, you can hear that sort of common root to refer to a leopard. But there are some really, truly fundamental differences. And we talk in that particular terminology on the Game Drive channel. It's become standardized throughout South African lodges, or through most South African lodges. That being said, sometimes I completely slip up and I speak English on the Game Drive channel. That has happened to me before. I know James very regularly speaks English, not because his grasp, I mean, of all of us, his grasp of local languages is far more advanced. He is essentially fluent. The various language and the various dialects, of course, so diverse within South Africa, and as you can expect, you start to get these combinations of different languages being used or bleeding into each other, so to speak. I'm just going to let this vehicle come past. Just bear with me for 1 second. Just turned off all my lights so we don't blind everybody. How's it? How are you?
Good, and you?
Good, thanks. We meet again.
Yeah. I hope you guys have a great evening.
We have. I hope you have too.
Thanks.
Cheers, guys.
Enjoy, guys.
Bye. Okay. Just making sure we don't blind all of the guests. Now, as our filming vehicle requires a certain amount of light, we certainly at times drive around as blinding Christmas trees almost. We are very much more lit up than the other safari vehicles, which is why our reactions and our reflexes are so fast to go and turn the lights off when we need to for the various animals. And it's just for these last few moments of darkness, when of course some of the most interesting things can happen. As we drive around with our spotlights, Dave, who's watching in Florida, was wondering why it is we can light up the lions, but not the hyena. And there's a lot of different explanations, Dave. So with our spotlight, it's very important to utilize it ethically, which is why we don't shine on daytime animals. But as of course you've realized, a hyena is not a daytime animal. The only time we don't use a spotlight on the hyenas is actually at the den site itself. We will shine a spotlight on a hyena, if it is an adult and if it is away from the den. But with the youngsters around the den site, they are incredibly vulnerable. They don't quite have the awareness, the sensory awareness, or necessarily the reflexes and the speed of the adults, and they don't have the size and the strength. So there are a number of animals that could potentially kill them. So by sitting at a den with a light shining on them, it might not do them any harm at all. Their eyes certainly won't be in any way damaged, their night vision won't be compromised, but it's just that extra level of distraction at a time when most of their nocturnal predators are moving about that we, as a policy, do not do. We don't sit with our spotlights on the hyena den. Well, I'm glad we got to spend a very brief amount of time with the Nkuhumas. We'll have to catch up with them tomorrow morning for the sunrise safari. And as we head off into the night, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Jeandre for his fantastic camera work as always, and to Kirsty and Rebecca in final control. Most importantly, thank you to all of you, the viewers, for sticking with us, sending through your questions and your comments. We will see you tomorrow morning for the sunrise safari. Bye-bye and have a wonderful day.
So, after those elephants disappeared, Brian and I just decided to sit and listen and enjoy. And we've heard two nightjar species. One we haven't heard of quite a long time, but I'm sure you know, which is the square-tailed or Mozambique. I call it the generator bird. And I am hoping one of them will call again. So there we go, the square-tailed nightjar. That's the male. And all white outer tail feathers. The female has got rufous ones. There's a little female. Very pretty. But the other one, which is more exciting, that we're going to have to try find for you, because I think it might be a new species for a lot of people, is the freckled nightjar. And he has a very, very distinct call. And he probably sounds very similar to one of your little dogs at home. Bow wow. Bow wow. So I was hoping they might call again. So Brian and I literally haven't moved. We've just been sitting here hoping for that nightjar to call. But unfortunately, they haven't done it again. There's a sort of change to the night at this time of the year as the insects sort of numbers decrease a little bit. You don't hear as many insects, and you start hearing those nightjars and owls, and hopefully lions, leopards and hyenas as well. But very exciting to be able to share this new area with you, and hopefully we're going to get some new birds, some new mammals, and some new insects. But from Brian and myself out here on the open of Cheetah Plains and the Mullet Thumb, we're going to say goodnight shortly, and I'm just going to pan you off into the darkness, and hopefully that nightjar calls in the last few seconds.